So thank you very much again, Alan, for the generosity and the time. I have some very brief introductory note about you, and then we will start the questions. So Alain Deneault is a French-Canadian author from Quebec. He's known for his book Noir Canada, Pillage, corruption et criminalité en Afrique, and the legal proceedings that followed its publishing. He got his PhD in philosophy from Paris 8 University, if I'm not wrong, under the supervision of Jacques Rancière. He has written many books, among them Offshore Tax Haven and the Rule of Global Crime, Imperial Canada, Legal Haven of Choice for the world's mining industries, and Canada, a New Tax Haven. So today we are going to deal with this book, Mediocracy, that I have the English version of it, which I think is the result of two essays in the English form. So the first question, Alan, from my part is all right here, right, is that given that you had written on critical, political, and explicitly geopolitical topics such as tax haven, offshore, and global crime, why did you come to, or what brought you to mediocrity?
Well, I consider my work as being separated in two categories. I would say political studies on quite factual and pragmatic topics, tax havens, the mining industry, the oil business, the sovereign power multinational corporations represent, and the neo-colonialism they practice worldwide. This is, and so I've done studies that are pretty documented with facts and footnotes, tens, hundreds and hundreds of footnotes, and so this is one type of work I do. And there's another type of work I do which is more related to critical thinking essays in a European manner, and it's about ideology. It's about finding words, intellectual practices, modalities that occur in organizations and institutions that have power in order to control people, to foster their energy, to make sure they work toward a direction that is being indicated by the ruling class. So this is another type of work, and trying to understand in which historical time we are. I tried in 3 different ways to conceptualize that time we're in. So it's about, if we think on a theoretical level, I worked on the concept of governance, which isn't for me a synonym of democracy, but a contradiction. I work on mediocracy, which is a social modality to exercise power nowadays. And also on a political level, I was interested in a concept which is the extreme center. And these 3 concepts are 3 different ways to try to figure out what are the ideological notions that are being used by the powerful organizations that run our daily lives.
All right. So it seems that one of the crucial points in this book, to begin with, is a distinction between mediocrity and mediocracy, which is this. What is? I mean, the question is that like Nietzsche's confrontation with mediocrity or mediocre is quite different. Mediocrity is found as the herd mechanism of survival, and it stands against intensity, fecundity, and even multiplicity in Nietzsche or even in Deleuze. Mediocracy is a comfortable uniformity. Yet, although your book starts with implications into a genealogy or psychology of mediocre, later on the book shifts to a socio-political or social modality of mediocrity, as we call it. How can we go from such morality of mediocrity in Nietzsche or stupidity in Musil that you also quote to politics of mediocrity?
Well, first of all, the first distinction I want to make is between being mediocre and behaving averagely. In French or in Latin languages, it's easier to do this distinction because we have the same linguistic roots for both words. Moyenne, médiocrité are come from the same word, and the idea is to recall in Latin languages that there is no word but mediocrité, mediocrity, to be mediocre, to talk about what's an average. If you talk about something superior, you'll talk about superiority. Inferior, it's inferiority. Something that's more like averagely mentioned, it's mediocre in French. So it's not pejorative to be mediocre. And I want to put that very clear right at the beginning. I mean, we are all mediocre in something, and it's not bad. I mean, when I do my breakfast, it's an average breakfast. I mean, I'm not a chef. I mean, it's not when I use my bike, I do it in a very averagely fashion. I mean, it's not a problem. The problem is the suffix mediocracy, and when a society asks you to be average, to behave averagely, this is the problem. Is that when the average is not an abstraction about ways to behave, what would be the average level of consciousness of history of the German people? What is the average time one need to walk 1 kilometer? What, all these notions can be abstractions because you may be beyond or over the data you obtain if you do sociological averages. But now it's not about like the creation of an intellectual notion to understand what's a range in which people behave. It's about an imperative. This is what we ideologically stand for an average. It's not sociological at all. It's not scientific at all. It's just about saying positively that this should be an average. It's a statement. This is my statement. I, as an industrial, I, as a banker, as a politics, say that this should be the average. It's the ideological representation of things, and then you shall be able to confirm this average.
Right.
It means that if you work on this in a studio for a television, that's a mainstream television, and you work as on the light because this is your duty. you may not, you have to know how it works. You cannot be a perfect unskilled person. They won't want you. So being mediocre is hard because you still have to have skills. You have to know how to behave. You have to know how the machines work, how you change, I mean, the apparatus, how the instruments. You need to be skilled, but you shouldn't be too skilled.
All
You
right.
shouldn't have seen a movie of Jean-Luc Godard with a specific light and say, well, I think we should try something like that for
Right.
our television show because
Right.
it doesn't suit with the standards. And so a mediocrity nowadays, it's about a standard. And the difference, another, I will be quick on that, but another distinction I wanted to make is between mediocrity in the 19th century, which was a despiteful notion. It was about laughing of people from the emerging middle class that were claiming power in the military society or in business or in art or in politics. They claimed that they had in the republic or democracy, they were um, experimenting, that they had right to pretend to well, go to office and, I mean, take decisions and have responsibilities, and so the bourgeoisie was afraid of this new middle class. So they were talking about mediocrity, the middle
Mhm.
class gaining in power and being able to overrule or
All right.
to gain control of the society. But nowadays, mediocrity is something that is very actively supported by the ruling class in terms of being all alike, stereotyped, standardized,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. And it's not only about the factory like Charlie Chaplin shows us in the modern times, but it's also about thinking,
Mhm.
about intellectual work, about
Mhm.
the consumptions,
Mhm.
about what we want, our desire, our
Mhm.
emotions. And so mediocrity is about the way powerful organizations tend to, it's never achieved, but tend to
Mhm.
structure
Mhm.
uh, all the aspect of a human life.
Right. Very clear distinction. I mean, two distinctions. I'm very grateful to you. It's very clear, at least for me, especially the second distinction. It's very unique, I would say, the difference between the end of 19th century bourgeois understanding of mediocrity as a pejorative word mixed with romanticism and the contemporary understanding of mediocrity.
If I
As
may add a word, in North America, I mean, the ruling class is showing itself as doing the same thing as um,
mm,
the blue collar workers
definitely.
in terms that they will go to a baseball game, but they
Mm,
will just have better tickets. I
right.
mean, they will
Mm,
hear the same music, but they'll be able to uh, have the artist in their living room instead of looking at
mm,
them
mm.
on a television screen. But and it's about sharing the same values.
Mm, mm. Uh, Alan, one of the main pillars of the book, especially given that you're academic and you're also in university still teaching, one of the very interesting points of the book is the way that mediocrity can also target education and pedagogy. One of the issues that I think somehow is also inspired by Jacques Rancière, perhaps, I don't know, the fact that you believe that the reason mediocrity has been so normalized in knowledge, culture, and even pedagogy is that it has been targeting the economy more than anything else. It's really interesting. In that regard, you believe that, I'm quoting you, as soon as oligarchs fall back into their bad habits, including corruption, duplicity, and mediocrity, experts on their payroll hurry to rescue them?
Uh, well, it, what happens with universities um, is quite alike, uh, look quite alike with what happened with social democracy.
Mhm.
Uh, this institution lost its own language.
Mhm.
So it has to speak the language of another power. Well, we know that in history, university always had to find um, an external structure to support it. Because it cannot be financed in an autarcic way. So it was at the beginning religious institutions, and then public states, republics, and
Mhm.
nowadays it's more businesses. Even though
Mhm.
the state put a lot of money in research and in the universities, um, in the governance regime, they tend to ask the universities to create results that are relevant for
Mhm.
the industries, and they support it on that them on that condition. So, when universities lose their languages, their autonomy, their intellectual autonomy, well, when you have rectors that talk about market, about uh, clients, about education being a commodity.
Mhm.
Well, you when they suffer the idea that the state won't support in a great proportion the university so that it can be independent,
Mhm.
and instead will support partnerships with the big industry, and will create programs that are oriented to marketing, business management, organizational psychology, and so on and so forth. When the fundamentals of the science will be
Mhm.
put aside or
Mhm.
instrumentalized for uh, the techno industry, and
Mhm.
any inventions or innovation
Mhm.
will be made toward the needs of an industry.
Mhm.
Well, you'll only subsidize the research and development program of corporations, and the university will be sort of a subsidized external body helping uh, corporations to finance their research and development programs.
Mhm.
And the main work, it was quite, it was well done and it wasn't that complicated or that sophisticated, but the main work that put me on that track was the representations of the intellectual of Edward Said, saying to a young spirit, well, you have choice. You may be an intellectual or an expert.
Mhm.
But if you choose, it's his words, if you choose to be an expert, then you won't use concept that you'll have built yourself. You won't work toward goals or principles that you will have establish yourself. You won't. You will have to practice a subtle form of censorship about aspects, consequences, dimensions of your own work.
Mhm.
You'll have to frame your work in a very specific way with protocols and with finalities that
Mhm.
will be the one of your employer, that
Mhm.
will give you maybe a bit of social capital,
Mhm.
a good living, and some advantages, but you'll have sold your potentials to
Mhm.
this. Well, and if you're an intellectual, well, nobody knows what will happen to you socially. You may end like Rosa Luxemburg, or like Noam Chomsky, but it's randomly you'll have a career, or you'll be killed by an ideological regime. But this is not about making a living out of it. It's about referring to intellectual principles, considering that they are sovereign. So you work in relation with what a spiritual commitment in um, in thinking means, and you consider the value of what you do with respect to principles in which you believe, and that are independent from any form of instrumentalization or power, or I don't know, strategies or tactics being specifically developed in a context that can be influenced by market and interests. So this is the idea. And so if we see that universities tend to support industry and merge with them. And I wanted to illustrate that with some telling examples, like the Université de Montréal, which is the most important French university of North America, as for rector Guy Breton. And Breton said, well, we're shaping brains that I'm trying to translate this ugly sentence. We're shaping brains to with the intention that they look alike what the corporations wait from us. So we're shaping brains so that they can operate in corporations when they'll be on the labor market. So, and it was interesting because it was saying quite the same thing as Patrick Lelay, which is the CEO of a French garbage television, which is TF1, which is the most seen television in France, which is very mainstream, very unrelevant. And that guy said once, well, we're selling time. We're selling the availability of brains to Coca-Cola. We're preparing the brain so that it can receive the advertisement of Coca-Cola. So because our television shows are stupid, are weak, are funny, and so it's exactly what psychologists tell us to do if we want to prepare the brain to receive positively an ad of Coca-Cola. Well, Guy Breton was quite saying the same thing about the university. We're working on the brain of a student so that it will suit the working processes of big corporations. So, and what was interesting in that perspective is the lack of autonomy of the university, and the idea that it's not, well, it was about an ideological proposal. The idea is that it's not even that science is a commodity, and we sell it so to students, saying you'll be in debt, you'll face a lot of challenges, because when you'll come out of our institution, yes, you'll have a degree, you'll have a diploma, but you'll also have 30,000, 40,000 of debt under 30 years old, and you'll have to face the labor market, expecting to have a family, buy a house, and paying these student loans. So, and so we sell to students the diploma as a commodity to be on edge on the labor market, but at the same time, and this is the lie on that we're saying to corporations, invest in our university, support students giving small grants, and put your name on our research center, if you may. Invest in us, and we have a commodity to sell you. It is a student. And in the capitalist history, it's the only commodity that pays to be one. So you ask students to pay a lot to become themselves a commodity that you'll sell to big to big corporations, and this is why the university is being so deeply corrupt. It's not about corruption like small envelopes or whatever when we think about corruption. It's a philosophical corruption, like Aristotle, when he talks about corruption. It's when something is being so changed, it's so deeply changed that we don't recognize its nature.
Its nature. Right,
when I go to university, I don't recognize the nature of the and Bill Readings would have said that in a much better way than I do.
So the interesting point is that in your book, Gouvernance, le management totalitaire, like totalitarian management, which seems to have been the first part of the actual book, you focus on governance as embodying a tendency to replace politics with management, something that can also be seen in the works of Alain Deneault. In an interview, you relate mediocracy to managerial modalities, which mainly took place after the industrialization and standardization. What is this tendency in management, and what is wrong with this kind of management?
Well, it may sound paradoxical to say that, but since governance is at the origin a French word, it's more shocking to see it arrive in French than in other languages, because that word governance disappeared in the Middle Ages in France. In French, we stopped use it between the 13th or 14th century. And at the beginning, a long time ago, la gouvernance, governance, was about learning to behave properly in a society. You don't cut, you don't you know a bit how to eat in front of people, and so on and so forth. This was la bonne gouvernance, how to behave. And it's quite a bit what it still means, because if you believe in governance, well, you believe in a way to respect the powerful people, to behave properly, to say yes or no in the good time. And it's about mediocrity too. It's about being in a certain and very strict framework. But this is what it meant, and it's a word that was totally, forgotten. And well, after the Second World War, inspired by oil corporations and by the fact that during the Second World War, on a military basis, model appeared to manage worldwide organizations, military organization. You had to feed soldiers. You have to make sure they had in oil or or all kind of provisions. So the management became to evolve in a worldwide perspective. So this is a heritage of the Second World War. So you had in the civil sphere and in the industrial organizations, well, skills to manage on that scale. A business, any kind of business. So corporations became very big after the Second World War. So you had to think of ways to manage so big entities. It wasn't only like Rockefeller that was taking a decision and now everybody had to follow it. You had multinational corporations being involved in tens of countries, in several languages, with a lot of shareholders, with a lot of partners, of stakeholders, clients, and so on and so forth. So in the business schools and the scholars start to develop that theory about well, the politics in a multinational corporation. Who has power? Who decide? Who follows? How do you make sure that the orders are being followed? What are one's rights and duties, and so on? So it's a bit like the constitution of a state, but for a corporation. So they had to find a name for that, and as they do often, they found a very pretty word, inspired from the French culture. So they called it governance. Oh, wow. So this it looks very serious. So governance appeared as a theory to manage a big private corporations. So at that point, I have no big problems with that. I struggle against the existence of multinational corporations as such. But if you call governance the way to manage the power inside among these big structures, it may go. But the problem is when Margaret Thatcher and then Ronald Reagan, I mean, I think about their administrations too, and in Canada, Brian Mulroney, Jacques Chirac in France, and other political leaders start to use governance to talk about the way state should be managed as a private corporation. So it meant also the hospitals, the public libraries, museums, schools, and whatever you can think about that is related to the state, universities. It had to be managed and ruled like a business, efficiency, control, profits, and profits, processes, supervision. And it's very ugly in French because you then have all these anglicisms that, and in Germany it's terrible too, because in Germany anglicisms are not even translated. You won't say die Gruppe, you'll say der Team, and so on and so forth. And so when I hear some people like in Germany talking about the daily life of a private organization, I ask them to talk directly in English because they all use English words anyway. So anyway, and so you have all this colonization of language toward the theory of private organization that arrive in the public sphere. And then you had the World Bank that decided to use that word, governance, global governance, good governance, to make sure that the burden of development of southern countries would be on them and not on the IMF that failed with the all their projects and protocols, the plan d'ajustement structurel, the structural adjustment plans. I don't know how we say in English. So that was a failure from the IMF and the World Bank. So the governance was a way to say to the African states, the Asian states, the South American states, Eastern Europe states, well, if you want to develop, you have to make sure you have good governance. It needs to be business friendly, no taxes, no duties, no environmental laws, no labor laws, and it's about good governance. So you'll attract capital, you'll make sure that they work in a monoculture or very high scale industrial involvements and so on and so forth. So, and then the word became common, and governance was about anything. And that's why I say that it isn't in an ideological concept, in the sense of an ideological concept remain clear on what it wants. It's full of contradictions. It naturalized reality, and choices. There's a lot of problem with ideology, but at least it says something with the ism at the end. It's about believing in something, liberalism, fascism, any. Well, not, governance is not an ideology saying something. It's the opposite. It says nothing. You can put anything in that. It may be consultation. It's be the way a government make decisions. It's going to be about creating a round table to have the advice or the positions of any kind of sociological subject. It can be about just managing accountability. It can be also about the organigram of an organization, who's the chief, who's the white collar workers, blue collar workers, what's the role of the unions, and so on and so forth. It just can be so it can be anything. And I quote conferences in which we had to talk about governance because it's a subsidized word everywhere. So they had to adopt this word. And at the end of the conference, the last speaker, that is like sort of the keynote, says, well, it's clear that we don't understand ourselves since we adopted this vocabulary, because it means nothing. But if we believe in it, a bit like Blaise Pascal said, "Abétissez-vous," be stupid and you'll have the fate. Only if we still believe and use it, with time, this notion will gain in substance, and it will maybe mean something. So it's pathetic, and you see all the scholars, running in that direction because there's money related to it and power. If you ask for a grant and you say you're working on governance, you have more chances to have it than if you say that you work on critical thinking related to Marxism. So it's just about, searching for money, and so that it says a lot about the state of science nowadays.
One of the interesting points of the book, already in the beginning of the book, is how universities, how education, how pedagogy can function as a source of or means of manipulation. There is a part in the book, I'm quoting you, binding themselves to big business and institutions of power, holding nothing back. Research institutions are not just selling knowledge to their clients, they are also partners in manipulation. Universities are a key instrument of lobbying firms despite the highly problematic nature of their firms' practices. It is a mistake to think of lobbying only in terms of canvassing elected officials for the vote. As opinion specialists, lobbyists take a much wider approach. Namely, they work to create context that will force elected officials to make certain choices without the lobbyist having to do anything. Seeking to influence reality itself, lobbyists attempt to manipulate a climate that is favorable to their clients' interests. And one way of doing this is to publicly mobilize industry-funded experts to give a performance. So it's interesting that in your analysis, lobbying, in like intellectual lobbying, let's say, is just providing context for those who have money to justify their acts. So in that regard, I would go to the question that is about oligarchs. I mean, the word that we hear a lot, and just we attribute to only to Russian. You know, we say to just Russian oligarch, as if there is
No,
no other, as if there is no other oligarch in the in the world. I was thinking the other day that. According to your analysis, we can claim that mediocracy is a global phenomena. It's not necessarily ideological. It's based on governance, and which it can be German, it can be Russian, it can be American, it can be Muslim, it can be Christian, it can be, you know, different sorts of that.
and at the end it becomes apatrid. Because at the end, the subjects, the political subjects of our time are not persons. They are multinational corporations being recognized by law as subjects. It's like fiction. It's like creatures, legal creatures that have all the power of an individual instead voting, but voting that may take decision. I mean, it's not an individual nowadays that take decision. It's Shell, it's Monsanto, it's Disney, it's Total, it's Coca-Cola. They are subjects by law. And it's interesting to hear what it says. It's about subjects that have a limited responsibility. Wow. How would you feel if the state, in a legal manner, would say to you, you have a limited responsibility, whatever you do. At one point, we won't able to tackle the one that take decisions because they only manipulate the Muppet, which is Monsanto, which is Disney, which is Microsoft, which is Shell. It's a Muppet. And those who manipulate the Muppet aren't responsible of what the Muppet does. The Muppet may have fees, I mean, something to pay if by mistake a court somewhere in the world find them guilty of something, and it will always be very sectorial. But the responsibility is being limited. So this is one aspect. And in what you've said, there are two topics. Lobby is about selling public decisions. I mean, if in Brussels, in Berlin, Paris, Washington, you have so many lobbyists. And you have, I mean, corporations putting millions and billions in this business, in this industry. It's because they invest in something. They wouldn't just throw away money like that. So what are they buying when they invest millions and billions of dollars in lobby services? Well, they buy public decisions. And in some countries like the United States, they buy the representative or the senator right away. I mean, they finance the campaign without any kind of constraint. And just 1 second.
Sure.
Sorry, you'll have a bit of footage to do. And lobbyists aren't anymore. I mean, what we tend to think when we hear that word, people that try to influence power, they run the state. I mean, Emmanuel Macron comes directly from the banking sector. And he doesn't hide at all the fact that he is still thinking like a banker. And you have in France, Benoît Hamon, which was the candidate for the Socialist Party in 2017. And before that, he was Minister of Education. And he told after he left office, that well, as minister, he didn't need to have the pressure of lobbyists because his own employees in the department were thinking like lobbyists, because they were trained in schools where the lobbies also, well, teach. They don't just put under pressure the school, they manage to teach. In Montreal, the well-known École Polytechnique, which form engineers and train engineers and teach to engineers, is led still today by someone who worked at Total previously, and he said openly that he wanted the industry to teach directly to students. So you ask someone from Total to go teach to students, give a course, and so to make sure that they think right away like they want them to think when they'll be working for them or for other corporations. So, and about the intellectuals, I was shocked about by a sentence or a paragraph from Chris Edges when you worked at name any kind of problem in our time that is very confronting. Global warming, wars, lack of diplomacy, stupidity, crisis in organization, I mean, depression. Well, in all problems, you'll find people with university degrees being at the source of the problem. You cannot find one problem where you won't find any scholar, anybody that wasn't trained. And you can talk about also program obsolescence. Do we say that too? You make sure that you buy that and you'll make sure that it will be broken inside a year, or all psychological methods to manipulate consumers. And it's all about having a degree, being trained, being formed by an institution so that you have the ability to work that way and to destroy things. And let's talk about the mining industry, the oil industry. I mean, accountability, about tax havens. Name any problem, you'll have people that went to your university to learn what they're doing.
Very interesting and definitely tragic, I should say. The one point in the I think I have like one or two questions left before time runs out. The part of the book, I mean, I'm very interested in your idea when it comes to, I mean, you mentioned in the beginning of the book almost, I'm quoting you, those who don't participate in such duplicitous thought are excluded. And this exclusion, of course, is carried out in a mediocre manner through negation, denial, and resentment. End of quote. Here you talk, Alan, of a kind of violence, a kind of symbolic violence. What is that violence?
Well, it's about governance too. It's about well, in the theory of governance, you don't want employees, you want partners. If you go to Amazon, you have partners. And what partnership is about here when you have people gaining the minimal wage being partners? Or with Uber. With Uber, it's the same thing. It's the idea that you don't give order anymore. This is old-fashioned. Nowadays, a director doesn't give order, doesn't even explain how the work has to be done. Maybe you give targets. Stupid targets. I mean, unachievable those targets. But you put people into competition. You fire each 6 months 5 or 10% of the working force you have. So you put people under pressure. You have to fire 10%. You ask your middlemen to fire 10% of it. They have to find reasons. And they put under pressure. I studied that. I mean, I'm positive when I say that. So you have to find reasons, and you have to make sure that people resign by themselves, because you don't want to assume the fact that you fire them in reality. You have to put them under pressure so that they leave by themselves. They don't have, I mean, have access to programs when you're being fired to support them. No, and you don't have to pay yourself as a corporation. So, and well, they have to manage. They have to find a way to behave that may suit you, may please you as a boss, as a director, as a shareholder. You let them invent ways. And when someone finds a process that works in a better way, you make it a standard for the others. And you ask the others to make sure that they achieve some goals that are sometimes unrealistic or in a long-term basis. And you just, it's the cruelty of it is that you let people being volunteer in that process. They are supposed to wish to work that way because they are free. They are free to work in a way that they think it will please you. So when you are in the high level of a hierarchy, an oligarchy, you just cross your arms and you wait to see, well, which one will. And so that's why often, I mean, CEOs don't really know what happened when results are good. Or they might, multinational corporations being involved in Africa, corruption may occur, violence, whatever. You just look at the financial results. You don't care about how it happened. It must not create problems.
Right.
But you don't want to know exactly what happened. You don't want to know because it's a way to be to have a limited responsibility once more. And then there's for, I mean, middle class people, which are proletarians with a bit of money. Well, it's about sharing some values or having some attitudes that suit with a corporation, or being nothing. And I quote once more French President Emmanuel Macron, who said in the train station, when you walk, you see a few people that had success, and the others, all the others are nothing, he said. Nothing. Ils sont rien. Ils ne sont. You have the French president saying that most of its population are nothing. Okay, and people voted for him. Once more, didn't have choice then. Also, this is another question. This is another question. But and so you have people that you have the choice of trying to be a bit of something or nothing. And that's why I talked about mediocracy as being in a psychological scope, whether neurotic, I mean, they believe the organization that tells them that they have to work in that frequency, in that cadency, in that rhythm, with that smile, with that vibe, with that beliefs. And well, so they believe it. So they are sick at the end of the day. They take pills to sleep. They take a lot of coffee in the morning, and they go once more at work buying chocolates for their colleagues and trying to believe that it's the true path. So, and you'll have people that know, they clearly know that it's being mediocre to work that way, to sell things to old people that aren't able to read a contract. So you'll sell a piano to someone that cannot play, or you'll sell insurance products to people that are at the at a few years of being dead, and they know it's immoral, it's irrelevant, it's stupid, but they have to pay their mortgage, and they have to, I mean, get along with that society. But they know, and at the end they will maybe be activists in a union, or they just have a nervous breakdown because it's too hard to support. And you have people that are authentically mediocres. They love it. They know it's mediocre, but they love it. They wake up at morning and they try to manage how they'll be on the where they'll be on the chessboard, who they have to put aside, who they have uh, to seduce. They'll play their game. It's a game. It's always about being in a game, like a mafia, and you try to play the game as the best you can. And for them, I mean, sky is the limit, and they can hope to have a good living, because organizations love that kind of people. They are a bit like a specific type of lawyers. I mean, they don't believe what they say. They don't care about what they think, because they think they have no personal and intimate convictions about anything. They just manage to say what need to be said. Well, and then you have on the extremities, the extremes. Well, people that just don't want to play that game at all, and they will be poor people being on social programs. Maybe you have artists, intellectuals. I mean, I recognize myself that even though I was lucky enough to have at 50 years old a position in a very small university somewhere in the Canadian Maritimes. I mean, it's about doing whatever you want, criticizing that system, playing as less as possible the game, being quite always honest, clear with yourself, saying what you think, even though you may end like Rosa Luxemburg. So, and doing that, or being sued, or being attacked, or aggressed by your colleagues, by anyone, or some people that do it, but in a less conscious way. They just feel that it's not for them. They don't. They cannot support just one ordinary Labor Day. It's not possible for them. So they'll find ways to get a bit of money. They'll be in debt. But you find somebody. This is I amused myself of doing these type of profiles.
Very interesting. The way you actually talk about it in relation to your own personal life also. Actually, the last, it's not anymore a question. I just want to read an interesting and beautiful part of the book to finish this interesting conversation with you. I mean, like towards the end of the book, you talk about Rosa Luxemburg and the likes, that where revolution belongs to the realm of necessity, and you make this beautiful distinction between corruption and corrupture towards the end of the book. One part of the book I just read, as I found it really beautiful, quoting you: themes of extreme center political debates are related to the phenomena of displacement and condensation that Freud analyzed as elements of the psychic work carried out in dreams. In both cases, the world is mentally reorganized around displaced symbols that one overloads with meaning instead of grappling with serious underlying issues. And here comes your interesting examples. The carbon exchange is extensively covered rather than ongoing environmental tragedies caused by industrial exploitations, fleeing Syrian war exiles rather than the pipeline at the root of the conflict, how the Greek debt will be paid off rather than the criminal arrangement that made the population responsible for this debt, parliamentary squabbles rather than the power of multinationals, a highly profitable fight against certain forms of cancer rather than simply dietary changes that might prevent that disease, managing the local hockey team rather than managing the state's sovereign wealth fund, and so on. Beautiful. And I have to thank you very much, Alan.